So, Prynhawn da, croeso I chi gyd. Good afternoon and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Extraordinary Council meeting, 3:30 on the 24th of November 2021. Simultaneous translation is being provided by Lisa Shepherd. And item 1, are there any declarations of interest? I can't see any raised hands, so we'll come in if you want to just come forward one by one. Oh, translation is here now.
Yes, presiding officer, translation is functioning now. So, apologies for that.
So members, if you would select your translation English if you wish to hear in English, and Spanish if you wish to converse in Welsh. Right, any declarations of interest? Councillor Yeo?
Yeah, I'd like to declare a personal interest as my member of my family. My wife is employed by Cwmtaf Health Board as a nurse in the Prince Charles Hospital. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Fori?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest in respect of the fact that I was an independent member, elected member representative on the Health Board for 3 years, ending in January 2015, I think.
Okay.
Or 16 was it?
Thank you. Councillor Josh Davis.
Diolch, Chair. Can I declare interest that I work for Cwmtaf Morgannwg Health Board?
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. So just to declare an interest, personal interest, my wife is in receipt of a pension, having worked for the National Health Service for 37 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Chair. We should declare personal interest that my son is a doctor in the NHS at Prince Charles Hospital. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman.
I'd like to declare an interest as a former member of Cwmtaf Local Health Board.
Thank you. Councillor Aaron Morgan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Declare an interest. I'm employed by Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board.
Thank you. I can't see any other members indicating. If there is any other member, please contact Democratic Services post-meeting. The next item on the agenda, I'd like to welcome Paul Mears, Emrys Elias, Greg Dix, and Kelechi Noam. And over to you, Paul.
It's over to me in the first instance, Chair.
Oh, okay.
My name's, good afternoon, my name is Emrys Elias. I am the chair of Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board. I have with me today 4 of our executive team: Paul Mears, the Chief Executive, Dr. Kelechi Noam, the Director of Public Health, Greg Dix, the Director of Nursing, and I believe Gareth Robinson, the Chief Operating Officer. We're going to give a presentation to today's Council on COVID recovery, the elective recovery programme, and provide an update on the maternity and neonatal services. I now hand over to Paul and his team to lead on the presentation.
Thank you. Is Paul online?
Just searching the screen myself, Presiding Officer.
I can't see him.
He's just coming into the meeting now, Presiding Officer.
Yeah, we just for members' information, we suspect because Zoom recently did an update. I know a number of us were prompted with that update before we joined this afternoon's meeting. It does, as well as being an issue with the translation and the recording, it does appear to have started a queue of members joining the meeting. So apologies for that, Presiding Officer.
Okay, thank you.
So to confirm, Chair, Paul, I appreciate that you weren't online just then. There was a problem with Zoom, but just to confirm, I've given an introduction. And I was just handing over to you now to lead on the presentation, Paul.
Thanks, Emrys, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for asking us to come along. It's good to see everybody. Hopefully you have did we have the presentation sent through to you already? If so, are we able to launch that? Thank you. So, as Emrys has introduced himself, I will kick off 1 second. Sorry, I'm just technology issue here with the. Okay, so I've got a couple of my colleagues on the call with me today as well, who have got the subject matter knowledge about a few of the areas that you've asked us to talk through. So if we can go on to the first slide, please. So what we're going to give you an update today on was a few things that members have requested, one of which was an update on where we are with COVID. Obviously, it's still very much with us, and we're dealing with the consequences of that on a daily basis within the Health Board. The elective recovery, you'll know there is a big pressure on all of the NHS services at the moment in terms of catching up the workload that had to be stopped whilst we were in the pandemic. And also an update on where we are with our maternity and neonatal services as well. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to pass over to Kelechi, our Director of Public Health, who should be on the call with us now. And he's going to take you through the slides to give you an update on the COVID situation. Kelechi, can I hand over to you?
Paul, Prananda, everyone. Good afternoon. And what I'll just do is just to give an update on the COVID situation. I do apologize that these slides, the data in the slides are correct up until the 16th of November. And what I will do verbally is give any relevant updates where there are things that may have changed in terms of direction or trajectory since the 16th of November. But the slide that you've got in front of you now is just describing the 7-day cumulative infection rates per 100,000 for RCT. And essentially it's tracking the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. I'm sorry, I'm not the one presenting, so you probably can't see my cursor. So essentially there's the first wave, there's the second wave, and there's the third wave. And what we sort of expected during this third wave, and which is what the modeling is essentially showing, is that we will have these periods of upswings and downswings, if I may use that word. So things will go up and down, but the general direction of travel for the third wave, unless something significant happens in the system to change that, is that we should expect a reduction in terms of COVID incidents from this point right through the winter. So in terms of where we are currently in RCT, we're in the early phases of an upward swing. And currently, as of today, the 7-day cumulative incidence in RCT is described as about 447 per 100,000, which is an increase from the previous 7 days. But like I said, it's in keeping with the pattern of ups and downs that we will expect, but a general trajectory of reduction going into winter. If I kindly ask that you move to the next slide, please. So this one is describing the test positivity rates, and the reason why we generally monitor both cumulative incidence and test positivity rates. I always like to give my fishing analogy, is that the positivity rates essentially tell you how much testing you're meant to be doing. If we're getting positivity rates, then that means there's a lot of COVID out there for us to do more testing. So we've been monitoring the positivity rates generally, and generally what you would expect is that the positivity rates would be following the general pattern of infections. And again, you can see this is just the second wave and the third wave, rather than, it doesn't have the data on the first wave here. But essentially, you can see that upswing in positivity rates stabilizing and essentially being on its way down. We expect this to track the infection rates in the community over a period of time. Next slide, please. So the next three slides then essentially break down the pattern that I've been describing, but this time by age group. So I'll look at the pattern in under 17s, and then in 17 to 59-year-olds, and then in above 60-year-olds. in Rhondda Cynon Taf. So essentially, this is the data for under 17s, and it's showing the numbers tested. So that's 7-day cumulative sum tested, and then the positivity rate. And essentially what you can see there is that there is, and which is a pattern that we've seen all through COVID, that we've done a lot of testing for COVID. And you can see that we've tested a lot more than the positivity rates demonstrate pretty much right through all the waves of this pandemic. And that's about right in terms of policy, that we've done a lot more testing than may have been indicated if we were just looking at the positivity rate. But again, you can see how that varies by age group. So we've done a lot more testing than necessary, you might describe, in under 17s. If you move to the next slide, you'll see how that increases. And then if you move to the next slide, you can see how that's even much higher. And essentially what it's saying is that this last slide I'm describing now in above 60s is capturing a lot of the testing that we've done in care homes. And it is the right thing to do. We've seen, we all remember the pattern of mortality that was really sad that we had in care homes during the second wave principally. So I think it is right that we're doing a lot more testing than might have been indicated if we were just looking narrowly at positivity rates. If I move on to the next slide. So this is then looking at, I looked at community incidence rates. We've looked at testing and positivity rates by different age groups. What this data here is describing is the weekly numbers of inpatients admitted in the hospital for COVID. And it's presenting the Wales data and comparing that to the ComTaf Health Board data. And essentially, if you look at the more recent data during this third wave, it's stabilized. So the inpatient admissions for COVID in the hospitals have stabilized and they are on their way down. I'm very mindful that that's a slightly different pattern from when you have hospital outbreaks. So this is just looking at COVID admissions from the community into hospitals. Next slide. Then this is national modeling, essentially telling us what we expect to see over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of months going into next year. Obviously, the model is based on the information we have at this time. So the national model, this dip that you can see in early October, if you remember the incidents that happened in some labs in England that affected a number of our populations or communities where we had many false negatives. So this dip we saw here is an artifact of that incident, essentially. But when you just go past it, what the data, and then the black dots, actually the actual numbers. So the actual is tracking the modeled data. And essentially the modeled data is telling us that from now going up until into the winter, we should have a reduction, and things would tend to stabilize post-Christmas and then continue in the downward trajectory. So as far as COVID is concerned, the modeling is telling us that we should expect the trajectory to be downward. That is not in any way saying anything about what flu might do during this winter, although I have to add that if we look at the experience of the Southern Hemisphere, they've escaped without much of a circulation of flu during their winter. So if that is replicated over here, then we should have a relatively manageable winter from a COVID and a flu perspective. Obviously, we're going to look at elective recovery in a moment, and that's a slightly different picture from what we're talking about in relation to COVID. Next slide, please. And this is that data that I just made reference to, because they've been able to then model the numbers of missed cases that we had right across all the local authorities in Wales. And it's the projection of the national modelers is that we may have missed about 1,200 cases in Rhondda Cynon Taf during that period. Clearly, that would have had an impact on our transmission and the epidemic, if you like. But it's fair to say that we've gone past that stage. This is just taking a retrospective picture now. Next slide, please. So what we normally do in the health board is when we get the national data, we take the same national modeling data and we adapt it to ComTaf Morgannwg. And here, what this data is essentially saying, so the blue sorry, you can't see my cursor, but the blue line and the orange line, I think this is orange, the blue and the orange line are describing the modeled incidents and admissions into hospital, whereas the gray and the amber are looking at the actuals. So essentially our actuals are tracking our model and slightly under the model. But the general story is that we should expect a reduction and a stabilization in COVID incidents going forward into the next couple of months. The only things that we're aware that might change that is if there is any emergence of a variant of concern. At this point, there is a variant under investigation. It is not yet a variant of concern, but if you eliminated the impact of any emergent variants, we expect the levels of COVID circulating to be on a downward trend from this point over the next couple of months. Next slide, please. And so this is just looking at the modeled acute bed occupancy. Again, what we're seeing here is that the red one is essentially looking at the modeled version, and then we're seeing that stabilize and begin to go on its way down. So bed occupancy for COVID absolutely reflecting what we would expect because community admissions are reducing. I add that if there is a significant impact from hospital-acquired infections, that might change some of these patterns. Next slide, excellent, so I think that's the where I wanted to stop with COVID. I'm happy to, Paul, I don't know what the plan is. Are we driving through? Are we pausing for questions?
No, I think we'll probably go through the presentation and collection, then we'll take questions at the end. So thank you for that. And I think, as you rightly said, we need to recognise there is still significant pressure on our services linked to COVID. And we'll probably come and talk about perhaps in the questions if there's anything specific councillors would like to ask on that, and we can touch on vaccination as well if that would be useful. I'm going to pass on now to Gareth Robinson, who's our Chief Operating Officer, who is just going to give you a brief overview of some of the work we're doing to try and maintain and catch up some of our elective surgical work, which has obviously had a significant impact from the pandemic. And there is much work underway at the moment across the health board to try and ensure that we are able to get to patients who need treatment, operations, diagnostic procedures. Gareth, did you want to take over, and if we can put the slides back up again, please?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, Panandar. Can I just check you can hear me?
Yeah.
So it's a new device on Zoom, so I just needed to check. So I'll just quickly cover 3 areas as Paul's described. And I'll start with the elective recovery programme. So we fall into language around elective. What we effectively mean is the type of care where people choose to come into hospital for an outpatient appointment or a surgical procedure. And that is the large element of care that was actually stood down during the COVID period when hospitals and other services were focused entirely on responding to COVID. As we've come out of COVID, and we're not, as we've just described, we're clearly not out, but as we've started to emerge from the huge pressure of COVID, we were able to start standing these services back up. But because of the changed nature of the way that we provide care now, with the distancing arrangements that need to be in place, the protective equipment that needs to be in place, and the prioritisation of our really vital resources, so our staff and the state, into COVID and unscheduled care, our elective work, our surgical and outpatient work, is really still slightly behind where we would want it to be. We've been really fortunate, as have most Welsh health boards, to receive £16 million in dedicated recovery funding for surgery from Welsh Government, and there are actually other pockets of funding that are coming in that add into that, and that's allowed us to provide additional capacity over and above what we'd ordinarily would to try and accelerate our recovery in this area. There's probably 4 main areas or 4 aspects that I want to just quickly touch on. The first is on inpatient and elective surgery. There's a number of things that we're doing in this area, predominantly relying on that funding to bring our teams in outside of core working hours or outside of when they would ordinarily work, to try and increase the amount of activity that they can do in the working week, and take advantage of gaps in services where they become available. And that's allowing our staff to be deployed into outpatients and theatres in slightly different ways. We're also reviewing our waiting lists to make sure that only patients that need to be on there are on there. This is a really important aspect in terms of prioritising those with a clinical need that need to come into hospital most urgently, and that we're not wasting vital resource on patients that might not always need a follow-up appointment, or patients that feel like their care is already being provided. And sometimes historically we may not have been on top of that. So that's a real part of our focus, in making sure that only patients come in through the doors that need to. We are outsourcing to the private sector. So for specialties such as orthopedics, gynecology, ophthalmology, we're accessing dedicated surgical facilities off our core building, off our core estates, that allows us to have a degree of certainty around that patients being able to access their care. And that is a component of our recovery programme that's really important to us. Just moving on to primary care as well. In fact, no, sorry, as part of this inpatient elective surgery, we're actually moving some away from what we would ordinarily do in hospital settings out into primary care, particularly for services such as ophthalmology, optometry, diabetes. These are services that historically have been slowly transitioning into primary care, that we've been able to accelerate as part of our COVID response, and be able to deploy access to services away from hospital settings, which are sometimes more challenging. On the primary care side of the equation, there is a slide which I'll come on to in a second, so I'll just pause on that for a second. On outpatients, the role of virtual clinics is really important to us. So we're increasingly seeing something like 20% of our care provided through virtual and online consultations. It is a challenge for us in terms of the technology, and sometimes our patient groups wanting to access the more traditional face-to-face services, but we're trying to drive access through virtual consultations where clinically appropriate. And we're also using outsourcing in a different way within outpatients, where we're having online consultations, which will start in January, so that we can have a much greater capacity for outpatient care provision provided online, which is effectively a clinical triage. So we'll have online services. If it is deemed that the patient requires that kind of face-to-face clinical contact, then they can be brought into the hospital settings where necessary. But that again allows us to accelerate through some of the waiting lists. On the diagnostic side, we are again looking at maximising all of our diagnostic capacity. It is constrained. Again, the social distancing aspects has a particularly big impact on our diagnostic services. So we are looking to find alternative locations for diagnostics. One of the main successes of the programme is in January, we'll be deploying a mobile endoscopy unit at Royal Glamorgan Hospital, which will be for Royal Glamorgan and Prince Charles Hospital patients. Princess of Wales patients have access in good order already in Bridgend, but that will significantly increase the amount of endoscopy capacity that we'll have within the health board. It's a really good news story. If I could go on to the next slide. Within primary care, so GP services, optometry, dental services, and so on, there's a raft of other areas that is probably worth touching on. We have agreed with Welsh Government a proposal for a flow centre known as 111 First. So this is effectively where patients call 111. They go into a national programme at the moment. We're looking at deploying a regional response to that, a CTM response, which gives local people the first conversation with patients, and they can be diverted or directed to the right point of care. Traditionally, they tend to roll into their GP practice or into the emergency department, when there are a lot more services that they could access as a way of taking away from the GP and EDs, which are probably our two most pressured services at the moment. We've opened an urgent primary care service, which is sited in Ysbyty Cymru Rhondda. 4 practices have deployed a new way of working there, which is partially related to the 111 service, where patients can access through phone services and entry into primary care services in particular that take them away from GPs, who may be overwhelmed. We've adopted eConsult, which is the mechanism by which people can access GPs out of hours and effectively log their requirement to see a GP. And again, it allows GPs the opportunity to prioritise patients effectively. Electronic booking for primary care is on its way. So it's I think we're at a tipping point in terms of being able to deliver that, and that would again make primary care services more accessible for patients. We've got GP out of hours. We've merged the Bridgend service from the old Swansea Bay service, and that's now coming under the CTM umbrella. And we actually have a pretty resilient GP out of hours service compared to other health boards that struggle with their ability to recruit GPs into that service. So that again helps in terms of local primary care physicians being able to deal with patients in a more appropriate setting and potentially avoid patients coming into ED or being conveyed by WAST unnecessarily. And practices have support from an at-home team, which provide all sorts of specialist or semi-specialist services in the community where patients really need access to those services rather than being brought into. I think we've got one more slide, if we can just move on one more slide. Yeah, and this is just to really focus on our partnership working with local authorities. We stepped up during COVID, and then actually we stepped down our gold, silver and bronze command structure back in the early part of the year. We stepped that back up again in July. That drives really close working with local authority colleagues. The Directors of Social Care joined the CTM Gold call, and members of their team joined the Silver. So these are forums or fora which allow really rapid decision making. And that's really helping in us do things more cleverly across systems that ordinarily the kind of the artificial barriers might stop us doing. But there are more ambitious things being delivered within the CTM footprint around joint appointments, around the management of patients that may be waiting for social care packages in an acute setting. We're now looking at potentially placing those into temporary care home placements. Joint funding of therapies in community and a number of projects that help us move patients to their most appropriate care setting. We're also exploring what we think of as the Halvar hospital at home model, which is a mechanism by which we might be employing staff jointly to provide social care services and healthcare services to patients that have a need for both. My experience of working over the bridge is that these can often be quite difficult and fractious relationships. What is really striking is the quality of the relationships between the local authorities and the health board is really positive within CTM, and it allows us to make some relatively ambitious changes in the way that we work. I'll just pause for breath there before I pass over to Greg for the next section.
Thanks, Gareth. As you've described, big challenges that we're facing, and of course, against the backdrop of managing the elective demand, we are also managing a high level of demand for urgent services, non-emergency services, and this is the juggling act that we're facing at the moment of trying to protect capacity for our elective services, as well as dealing with very high volumes of people coming through as emergencies at the moment. And also, just to reiterate what Gareth just said around the close working relationship with local authorities, I think we've got a very positive relationship with the local authority, both at an operational level and a strategic level, and these solutions need to be found across the health and social care system. One part of the system can't work in isolation. There has to be absolutely a join up one. I think it's really encouraging to see the joint work that we've got going on with RCT, particularly around this agenda. The final area is going to cover off before we go to questions is Greg, our Director of Nursing and Midwifery, is going to give an update on the work we're doing on maternity services and neonatal services. So I'm going to pass over to Greg.
Thank you, Paul, and everyone. So I'm just going to take us through a couple of slides in relation to maternity and neonates. Could I have the next slide, please? Can you hear me, Paul? Yeah, thank you. Royal College reports published in May 2019. There were 70 recommendations made in relation to that original report. And you may recall we established a maternity improvement team led by our Director of Midwifery to ensure that the recommendations were appropriately actioned. The latest report, so the 5th progress report of our maternity services, was published in October 2021 and published by the Independent Maternity Services Oversight Panel, and confirmed that the Health Board had achieved 55 out of the original 70 recommendations made by the RCOG. And the remaining 15 are largely focused primarily on our continued leadership development journey. The headlines from the published report was that the Health Board had made positive progress in relation to our improvements, recognising the impact of both waves of COVID during our improvement journey. In relation to the clinical review, so there were 3 clinical reviews that the independent panel were reviewing. So ladies that were admitted to intensive care following the birth, stillbirth categories, and neonatal concerns. So the first of those reports were published back at the beginning of the year. That was the maternity admissions to intensive care report. The second report, the stillbirth report, published in October of this year. And the final report, which will be the deep dive into neonatal care, will be published within in April next year. What was encouraging from a health board's perspective and our community's perspective was that the findings in the original Royal College report supported our ongoing improvements in our original plan. So there were no other additional concerns raised within the clinical review work. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So lots of activity has happened over the last year, and I've listed just a few things on the slide here. So a revised, improved governance framework. So the checks and balances along the way in relation to how we ensure our services are safe. Much improved engagement with women and families. So we now have a women and families user group called My Maternity, My Way. And it's a listening, and several other mums and dads that had been part of our, or had accessed our services previously and have been working with us in relation to realising our new vision for maternity services. We've embedded several new systems in relation to guidelines, protocols and procedures across all of our units within the health board, and much stronger multidisciplinary team working. We have new leadership teams as well from both the maternity, neonatal and obstetric viewpoint. We have improved our processes for reviewing and disseminating learning from incidents, again across all of our units. And prompt training targets have exceeded, and prompt training is essentially multidisciplinary training which our teams access to ensure that in any emergency situations that our teams are skilled and competent in order to carry out the care effectively. So we've been very fortunate to have some very excellent prompt training leads, both from a medical and a midwifery perspective. And we're pleased we exceeded the national targets for that. Our current focus going forward from a maternity perspective is to embed all of the progress that we've made over the last 2.5 years. And we're just bringing together our new vision for maternity services, which will take us forward over the next 5 years, working in co-production with our My Maternity, My Way user engagement group. Next slide, please. Thank you. During our work within maternity, so probably a year into our improvement work, we recognised that we were having some challenges within our neonatal service, which works very closely with our maternity service, and we jointly commissioned, so the board jointly commissioned with our independent maternity services oversight panel, a review of our neonatal care, and some concerns were escalated to us back in August, and the concerns were generally focused around prescribing of certain types of medication, documentation, how we access specialist services either in Cardiff or Swansea, and some unexplained extubations, so essentially breathing tubes with some babies were being repositioned, and there were some concerns raised around that. We put lots of swift, immediate actions and make safes in place, and so just a few things I've popped on these slides. So our original maternity improvement team now consists of paediatricians, so doctors that look after children, neonatologists, so doctors that care for very premature babies, and neonatal nurses. So we very much brought some of the learning from maternity into our neonatal teams, And both teams now are led by a director of midwifery and an improvement director for neonatal services. We increased some of our pharmacy oversight into the unit. We've recruited a new senior nurse specifically for neonatal care. We've changed some of our consultant rotas, so our paediatricians have more time working within our neonatal services. We improved our access to some tertiary expertise, and we have some neonatologists working within our unit from some of the tertiary units, but from Swansea and from Cardiff, and lots of learning around a practice of inserting breathing tubes into our very, very small babies. And the neonatal deep dive work in relation to some of the concerns that the board identified will be published in January 2022. And I think that was the last slide. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks, Greg. Just before we go on to the questions, there are a couple of points which I'm probably going to jump in before, because I'm sure there will be questions about them. And Greg, one of them was, I was going to ping back to you actually, because I think there has been concerns. I know councillors may well have had concerns raised to them by constituents around visiting, both in terms of visiting for maternity services, but also more generally visiting across all of our services at the moment. Obviously, with the COVID situation, we have had to restrict our visiting again, which is obviously something we don't do lightly because we recognise the impact that that has on families. Greg, did you just want to quickly give an update on the visiting situation across the health board and particularly on maternity?
Of course, yes, thank you, Paul. So as Paul just articulated, so regrettably during all of the waves of COVID, we've needed to restrict our visiting to our patients. So general visiting, although visiting to patients with end of life, patients that require an additional needs, children, and some aspects of maternity we've continued, and we followed the national guidance that was circulated through the Chief Nursing Officer's office. We have a red, amber, green status for visiting across the health board, and essentially we're still in the red phase, which is our visiting is very restricted, although as I speak currently, our outbreak control board meeting is currently reviewing our visiting restrictions now. As Kelechi's described earlier, the transmission rates are reducing and our rates within our hospitals are reducing. There had been some cross-transmission of visitors, members of the community bringing in COVID to our sites. Unknowingly, as lots of our population, have or don't have symptoms. So it was a balance in relation to ensuring our patients are kept as safe as possible, but equally being mindful of some of the psychological concerns that our patients were having without being able to have the visitors very regularly. From a maternity perspective, visiting continued in relation to birth partners being able to attend dating scans and being able to attend in the established labour of their partners. So that continued, although we had to restrict visiting to our postnatal wards. The wards are 6-bedded bays. The bays are relatively small, and again, trying to reduce the footfall into those particular bays to mitigate any potential transmission from visitors to our mums and our babies. And in fact, as I've just said, those visiting restrictions are being reviewed as I speak here. Likely to be lifted to some extent due to the transmission rates, but there will be an element of restriction until our rates are a little bit lower than what they are. And I'm very sorry to our community in relation to the concerns that have been raised, both to Paul, to councillors and to myself. And again, it was striking the balance between mitigating potential risk to patients, which clearly is something that we needed to do as a health board. Thank you, Paul.
That's great. And just one other point I just wanted to come in on quickly to give an update on, which was about the status of the minor injury unit at Ysbyty Cwmcynan. Gareth was going to just give a quick update on where we are with that and the plans to get that back open as quickly as we can. Gareth.
Yeah, so for colleagues that may not be fully aware of the background, we had a kind of sustainability issue with our nurse staffing levels in Ysbyty Cumcanan, back in September now, where it's a unit that is run by 4 trained nurses. The sustainability of that was problematic for us and exacerbated by the fact that 2 of those have gone off on long-term sick. And with the balance that we need in terms of being able to provide specialist adult and paediatric skills, we're not confident of being able to run that service consistently on a daily basis. So rather than closing it and opening it on different days, we made the decision to collapse that service into Prince Charles Hospital, so we could run a minor injuries unit out of Prince Charles Hospital, and our patients and citizens knew where to access the service on a consistent basis. Those staff are being managed through their sick absences and 1 or 2 other issues that we need to work through, and we expect them back in the health board from early next year, which will then allow us to reopen the minor injuries unit into YCC very soon after that. It's pretty much reliant on getting those individuals back into work and kind of closing down some final training needs, but we expect that to be early in the new year.
So, Mr. Presiding Officer, that's all the input from our side. Happy to take any questions that people may have.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to every one of our guests who have contributed. I'm now going to go to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Andrew Morgan. You're on mute.
Yes, sorry, it's taking some time to unlock then. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for the updates from the Health Board. There's 4 particular areas I want to cover. First of all, I want to give thanks to the Health Board for the close working we've had with them throughout COVID, and in particular dealing with ongoing pressures between the hospitals, discharge, and obviously our social care system, which is under huge pressure in RCT as it is not just across Cwmtaf Morgannwg, but across Wales right now. There's a lot of joint working going on between the teams. I know that we do face difficulties and we try to resolve them, but it is a huge bottleneck of pressure in the system right now. And from the discussions we have when we meet with the chair, the chief executives, the leaders across Cwmtaf Morgannwg on a fortnightly basis, but also meetings with ministers, I have to say that there's no issue with the willingness of everybody trying to get people out of hospital, to try and get them into social care. We are suffering some real shortages of staff, in particular in local authorities, but that's not unique. It's in the same position in health boards as well. They're struggling in terms of staffing. So I just want to put on record, I think, the thanks for the work that is going on. I know the public, quite rightly, sometimes are concerned and are angry about delayed operations and various other problems with the health service and social care, but it isn't for the want to try, and I think that everybody is absolutely pulling in the right direction. So I wanted to put that on record first of all. I'm pleased you mentioned the Cumcanan Minor Injuries Unit. That is something, it's not a million miles from where I live. It is something that residents do raise with me. I'm pleased recently, you did confirm that it isn't going to be a permanent closure, and there's no suggestion it is. If anything, we've previously been talking about extending the hours at minor injuries, both in Ysbyty Cwmrondda and Ysbyty Cumcanan, in terms of looking at the wider position. So I'm pleased you confirmed it will reopen, and it is just a short-term staffing issue, which hopefully will resolve itself in the new year. I think that's important for confidence for residents to understand that. Turning on to the maternity services, I have to say the latest update I had from the chair of the oversight panel and the report that came out back probably a month, 6 weeks ago, more now at least, I have to say that I do feel vindicated in speaking up at the time when I did. I've been careful about choosing my words previously about individuals who formerly worked in the health board. I know that those from the health board here now can't comment on that, but I'm quite convinced that I wasn't misled. I'm quite convinced now, based on what I've been told, I was actually lied to, and I'm happy to put that out there publicly. I think that the latest report that suggested, I think it was 20 babies, could have had a different outcome if things had been done differently. I've had quite a number of families contact me, some living actually in my own ward. It's been quite upsetting speaking to them because they thought all along that things were not right, and it wasn't just, as it was described to me at the time, about more of a data issue, the way it was described in one meeting, that it was more of a recording issue which the figures related to. And I was assured, and we were assured publicly several times, that this wasn't about babies dying when they shouldn't have. Well, the report now says that isn't the case, and actually potentially, as many as 20 babies should never have died and potentially should have had a different outcome had they had the right treatment at the time. And I think that's for everybody who was involved in this period. But I appreciate the current chair and chief executive and others can't comment on that, but I felt I had to say that today as the latest maternity report from the oversight panel came out only a matter of a few weeks ago. I would, though, like to ask some questions around neonatal services, because as part of that, I understand the same oversight panel who has carried out the work in terms of the deep dive and reviewing this, and my understanding is the concerns that they expressed were serious concerns. And I know in the presentation it says that the health board has acted quickly on the points which were raised, but I just want to be clear. My understanding is from the briefing I've received from them and from Welsh Government is that the concerns within neonatal were of a significant magnitude, that they thought that those concerns that they were raising were quite serious. And I just want to ask, are all the recommendations or all the points which were raised as part of the review, have they now been addressed? Because it is important, I think, to give residents the confidence, like we've seen in fairness with the maternity services, where I have to say the health board has still got a number of recommendations to complete, but the vast bulk of them they fully implemented. And the view back from the oversight panel was there has been really good progress. There's more to do, but the health board is certainly, pulling everything out possible to try and make the improvements and to tackle those issues head on. So I think the health board and the current leadership of the health board should be commended for the actions they are taking to put right some of those wrongs from the past. So thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Paul, do you want to come back?
Yeah.
On those
Yes, thank you, Presiding Officer. So thank you, Councillor Morgan, for your thanks, and it's very much appreciated. On your question about neonatal, yes, to reassure you, the immediate make safes that were identified in the neonatal report earlier this year have all been actioned. I mean, just to say, this was a piece of work that the independent maternity oversight panel commissioned in conjunction with us, because we in the health board had got some concerns that the neonatal services were not at the level we wanted them to be at. So we got this piece of work done, which involved bringing in external experts in the field into our organisation to look at what we were doing. And as Greg described, there were a number of things that they picked up around clinical practice, which needed to be improved, which has happened. Greg mentioned prescribing, where we didn't have enough pharmacy input into the neonatal unit at Prince Charles Hospital. That's been rectified, and we now have a full-time pharmacist recruited to support the unit, and processes have been changed in terms of prescribing practice. And most importantly, as Greg described also, we have now much better established links with the specialist centre at Cardiff and Swansea, so that our consultants and neonatal nurses at Prince Charles and at POW and Bridgend can get access to specialist expertise when they need it, and it's done in a routine basis as well. And we're also exploring how those staff can rotate and get training and development by going to work in the specialist units as well to develop their skills and expertise. So all of the immediate things we needed to improve have happened. There are some other recommendations from that report which will take a little bit longer because they just require staff development and training and things like that. But all the immediate make safes have been actioned, and the panel have been satisfied that those have been done.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to the Leader of the Opposition, and then I'm going to take other members. But members, if we run out of time, I'm going to ask the Cwmtaf Health Board if they will respond to written questions like last time. Thank you, Paul. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I go back? I mean, the Leader has covered many of the areas. I was particularly concerned that there was no mention until it seemed our faces prompted the local health board to mention the Ysbyty Cwm Cynnan. But can I go back to the maternity? And in the early days of this scandal, it was said by a previous chair of the board that the police had taken an interest in some matters. I don't know whether the police have still taken an interest in any matters relating to maternity, or is that no longer the case? And I just wondered if there's any indication on predictions of the expectation that the Minister will take maternity out of special measures. I wonder if there's an indication has been given that that's likely to happen in the not too distant future, or is that being over optimistic? I also wondered if some reference could be made to the effect of waiting times on Prince Charles Hospital A&E, because it does seem from stories I'm being told by patients that the A&E in Prince Charles doesn't seem to be coping particularly well. I appreciate the pandemic, and I appreciate that the bed occupancy for COVID may have been levelling out, but I wondered, what about the bed and availability? I know of a case last week, presiding officer, where a stroke victim was picked up by the ambulance service as an emergency at 10 o'clock in the morning, and 11 o'clock in the night, that same patient, despite being taken into the hospital for certain tests and treatment, on each occasion, post-treatment, post-test, they were returned to the ambulance. And she finally left the ambulance at 11 o'clock in the night, and there was still no bed or trolley even available for that lady. So I just wondered if we could have a bit of a briefing on how desperate the situation is in the A&E in Prince Charles. I don't know whether you're going to be inviting any more colleagues, Chair, or do you expect me to try and cover as much I can of the Plaid Cymru questions?
I am going to call in Councillor Jarman. I have got a number of colleagues coming in, and I'm looking, we've probably got 20 minutes to get through. If you, either you can do it or you can leave it to those members. I hope to get 2 of your members in.
Okay, well, on that basis, then I'll end my contribution there to give them a fair chance to come in, presiding officer.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mears, would you like to come back at that, and then I'll call
yeah,
in group?
Certainly, thank you. So just on the question of the maternity services and police, there was a case that the police had an initial referral about. That case has not been progressed by the police. So, and there is no further conversations ongoing with the police about anything with regard to the maternity services, just to confirm on that. In terms of the A&E issues at Prince Charles, you're absolutely right. There are some significant challenges, though I have to say that the significant challenges at Prince Charles are similarly felt at Royal Glamorgan and Princess of Wales as well. There is some particular challenges at Prince Charles, partly down to the layout of the department and the space that we have available. We are working hard with the team there to try and see what we can do to make some immediate changes to some of the space, because it isn't that easy to accommodate everybody who's attending. You're right to highlight the challenges of the ambulance service handover delays. That is a problem that we are experiencing in our health board, as it's being experienced in many health boards across Wales, and indeed with the wider UK, the pressures that are being felt. We are trying hard, and Councillor Morgan mentioned earlier, you know, the pressure in the emergency departments is a consequence of the whole flow of patients not getting in the right place. So we have a number of patients at Prince Charles who could be being cared for outside of Prince Charles Hospital. They're ready to go medically, but we are either waiting for an onward placement at a community hospital, they might be waiting for a care home placement, they might be waiting for a package of care. And we are working hard with council colleagues to try and see what we can do to speed up the flow of patients out of the hospital, because that in turn frees up space for new patients to be admitted, which in turn frees up space for ambulances to be able to hand over. So it is a complex chain, if you like, that we have to try and work on. But on the practical level, the staff in the emergency department of Prince Charles are working really hard. We've had some recent input from HIW, Health Inspectorate Wales, about they've been in and reviewed it and have given some guidance and advice of what they think we could do to improve, and that's very much being actioned by the team. But there is no quick answer, if I'm being really honest, because the demand pressures we're facing are significant at the moment. But the teams there are doing everything that we can do to try and make the experience as best it can be, whilst recognising that for many residents, the experience at the moment is not what we would like it to be.
Thank you, Paul. I'm now going to go to Councillor Doug Williams, Councillor Steve Bradwick, and then Councillor Heledd Vychan. And can you get quickly to your points, please? If you want to ask a question, get to it very quickly. Councillor Williams.
Okay, thank you, President Officer. This question is for Mr. Gareth Robinson. I take on board his comments where he said that they've been given £16 million for elective surgery. I'd quote my wife's case where she fell down and broke a knee nearly 2 years ago. Since then, she's had meetings with consultants who said unless this lady gets a knee sorted, other problems will occur. Well, they did occur because she fell down again a couple of months ago and fractured a pelvis and fractured a bone, a second vertebrae in her back. Again, she was told that, and they were inoperable and they will heal themselves. Well, this week she fell out of bed and now she's got an appointment on Thursday because we think she's got a fractured shoulder. So I just want to know where these, and she has it down as an emergency. She's had a pre-op assessment on September the 2nd. I just want to know, first of all, where the emergency lists, how they have gone through. And secondly, do you listen to your consultants at all?
Thank you. And next up, Councillor Bradwick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There's something, and thank you for the presentation, Health Board. It's a little Councillor Jarman, excuse my cat, she likes to be in the picture. What Councillor Jarman said about the A&E in Prince Charles Hospital, I think is quite disgusting, really. The GP practices in my ward of Aberdare are actually telling patients, go to A&E because we can't take any more appointments in the doctor's surgeries in Aberdare. This has happened to me. I've got a chest infection, really bad chest infection for weeks now. And I was told, yeah, go to A&E, they'll sort you out in A&E. And I'm getting a lot of requests from residents in my ward saying the same thing from this doctor's surgery. It's absolutely appalling. You would run off your feet in A&E. You don't want people with bad chests going to an A&E, which a doctor can sort out with. I'm absolutely appalled. I have put a complaint into the Concerns Department of the Trust. That was 9 days ago. I'm still waiting for a reply from you. Thank you ever so much, Presiding Officer.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bachan yn Gymraeg?
No, in English. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Similarly to Councillor Bradwick, getting a lot of complaints from residents about GP appointments and being pushed to attend A&E, which they don't want to, in terms of adding to pressures there. So very concerned that people are having a delay in services or access to medical assessments. I wanted to ask two specific questions as well. If you could also advise us on the steps which have been taken recently to safely deliver vaccinations for vulnerable young people with additional learning needs, autism and disabilities. I've received some complaints that the experiences haven't been very positive for some young people when attending vaccination centres. Also, I've just seen breaking this afternoon the BBC News story around 2,000 patients having died after catching virus in hospital. I wondered if you do know the statistics in relation to Cwm Taf Morgannwg in terms of those tragic deaths and whether you had any comments on that story for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bachan. Mr. Mears, would you like to come back at this point?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. On the point about GP access and people being sent to A&E, that would be, we will pick up that particular issue from the councillor who raised that with regard to practices in Aberdare, and just see what we will talk to the GP practice there and find out what's going on. You're right. We don't want people coming to the emergency department unless they really need to be there. And it's not if we've got that issue going on with GPs sending people there, then we need to pick that up with those practices. I would say to be fair to our GP colleagues, however, that they are under, like everybody, a huge amount of pressure at the moment. There's a large volume of people wanting appointments. And I met last week with a number of our GPs to talk about what we can be doing as a health board to try and support them at this time, because they equally are facing immense pressure and they are struggling to keep up with the workload of demand coming through their front doors. Having said that, the answer isn't to try and move the problem down from one place to another. So we will pick those issues up, and I will also pick up the issue of the concern that's been raised with our department and make sure you get a response promptly on that. On the point about vaccination for young people with learning disabilities and autism, I have had a concern raised with me by a family member about the experience that their young person had at one of our vaccination centres, which wasn't a great experience in terms of being sensitive to the needs of that individual. I have made sure that we've communicated out to all our vaccination centres that we make appropriate arrangements for people with autism and learning disabilities when they're coming in for vaccination, recognising that they might find it a very stressful experience, that we need to make sure that we are taking that into account when we're booking their appointments, but also that when they come in, the arrangements are being made to be sensitive to those needs, and where necessary taking them to a separate area and being sensitive to that. So that has been communicated out to all of our vaccination centres to make sure that as we get into the younger age groups, that we need to be making sure that we're making appropriate arrangements for those young people. And to the point about hospital transmission of COVID, you're right, there's been some national numbers released. We are working closely with Welsh Government on this at the moment, as are all the health boards in Wales, because there is a process for reviewing all of deaths in hospital that were linked to COVID and trying to establish, was that a community-acquired infection, i.e. somebody came into hospital with COVID, or did they catch COVID whilst they were in hospital? We don't have the precise numbers on that at the moment because we're just going back through all the cases and doing clinical reviews of those cases. But obviously, as we get that information, we'll be sharing that with the families concerned, but obviously also with key partner organisations such as the council once we've got that data established. On the point about the orthopaedic waiting time and the particular counsellor's issue, I would just say that I'll pass that perhaps quickly back to Gareth, just to give an update on what we're doing with our consultant orthopaedic surgeons at the moment to try and see what we can do to get waiting lists dealt with quickly, but also particularly the question about how we deal with the trauma cases. Gareth, you quickly want to give an update on that.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So in terms of Councillor Powderhill's query, I mean, in terms of the individual issue of your wife, but by all means, if we can get the kind of the patient details, I can look into that specific example. But I think for me, the fact that the patient, and I probably don't want to get into the individual examples, so I'll just talk in theory in terms of the emergency access at the moment. Those patients that are coming in through the emergency pathway should actually be still being seen in the normal timescale. So I'm concerned to hear that that's not the case. I'm really happy to pick that up individually offline. Orthopedics as a whole, I think your final point was around, do we listen to our consultants? Our orthopaedic consultants at Prince Charles Hospital is led by Mr. Stephen Saracen. They're at the front and centre of our response to the elective recovery programme, particularly around Merthyr Cynnon, up to and including looking to build the capacity for delivering orthopaedic surgery in other hospital sites. So on top of what we'll be able to deliver in Prince Charles Hospital, potentially being accessing Royal Glamorgan or Royal Gwent Hospital sites, which can expand our core capacity. So we'll continue to provide services in Merthyr Cynnon, but in addition, if we can develop services in capacity elsewhere, then that gives us an opportunity to catch the elective orthopaedic backlogs up much more quickly. But those are being very much led by the clinical teams, by Steve Saracen himself, as you'd expect, with the managerial support. But yeah, absolutely, we do listen to our consultants, and they're an intrinsic part of our planning response to catching back up with our orthopaedic backlogs.
Gareth, and just to be clear, it's not my wife, it's Councillor Doug Williams, okay?
Yes, sorry, I looked at my notes as soon as I said that, Councillor Powderhill, and realised I got the wrong person, so apologies.
No problem, thank you. I'm now going to go to Councillor Grehan and Councillor Wendy Lewis, and we are starting to run close to time. Councillor Grehan, yn Gymraeg?
Yn Gymraeg, ie, sgolwch yn dda, Cadeirydd. Diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyflwyniad. Yn debyg iawn I cynghorwyr eraill, dwi eisiau codi'r pwysau sydd ar ein meddygfeydd lleol ni yma. Dwi wedi cael galwad ffôn gan rywun yn Fywardy yn ddiweddar sydd wedi cael problem ofnadw gyda'i feddygfa bersonol Ath i'r ysbyty gyda palpitations ar ei galon Nath yr ysbyty I hala fe gytre a gweud mae eisiau newid eich meddyginiaeth chi, bod eisiau chi gysylltu gyda'ch GP. Nath wneud hynny, cymryd 8 wythnos i'r GP ffonio fe nôl. Gas ddim yn mewn, ond cymryd dros 8 wythnos I newid ei feddyginiaeth Rhywbeth falle bydde wedi gallu gwneud newid mawr iddo fe yn bersonol. A dwi'n credu bod y pwysau sydd ar ein meddygfeydd lleol ni yn erchrydus ar hyn o bryd, a bod nifer y bobl yn mynd i A&E oherwydd bod nhw'n gwybod dyn nhw byth yn mynd i allu weld GP. Felly, beth ych chi'n neud i weithio gyda meddygfeydd yn hynny? Ac yn ail pwynt ynglyn â'r orthopedics, dwi wedi clywed sawl cwyn gan bobl bod pobl hŷn sydd yn y system orthopedics yn dueddol o gael eu supersedio os oes pobl ifanc yn dod mewn i'r system, bod nhw yn derbyn blaenoriaeth o flaen unrhyw un hŷn, sydd yn fy marn i ddim yn neud sens, achos mae pobl hŷn angen eu trin fel bod nhw'n gallu gwella'n gynt. Mae gadael pobl hŷn cyn cael triniaeth, a bod pobl ifanc yn cymryd drosodd ddim yn gwneud synwyr ran gwneud i'r bobl hŷn yna aros yn y system gymaint yn fwy. Diolch.
Diolch, Councillor. And Councillor Wendy Lewis, it looks like you'll probably be the last. Councillor Lewis.
Okay, thank you, Presiding Officer. A friend of mine's daughter had a terrible experience in Prince Charles. Due to the changeover procedure, she was left unattended. This young mother had previously had a stillbirth and was understandably anxious. And the baby was nearly born in the corridor because there was no one on the desk to answer her buzzer. I know that you are aware of this case, but can you advise, have your procedures been changed now to take into account the handover and that there are people available during this time, please?
Thank you. Mr. Mears.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So just back to the question on first question about GP access. Absolutely, we are working very closely with the GPs, as I said, on this issue. I mean, there's no magic solution to the challenge because primary care colleagues are working under immense pressure, as I said, and there are some challenges around staffing that they're facing in the same way the hospital staff are facing. So the key thing here is to try and make sure, firstly, that people are accessing GPs services and they're able to get care when they need it. The case you mentioned there of a patient being discharged and then being asked to be followed up by the GP, we are looking at what we can do to try and smooth that pathway between hospital and GP, because sometimes GPs are being asked to do things that, quite honestly, we should be able to do in the hospital for the patient before they leave, and we're guilty sometimes in the health board of asking GPs to undertake tasks, which then puts more work on them, when actually we could probably sort that problem out before they even leave the hospital. So there is something here about how we can make that process a lot easier and try and relieve the burden ourselves on GPs. But there is also something we can do with our GP colleagues to try and alleviate some of the burdens that they have to deal with, particularly some of the admin work that they're dealing with, which we can probably try and do in a different way and support them to free up time. There's a number of things that GPs get asked to do. Many of you will know, GPs get asked to provide letters for insurance claims, they get asked to provide letters for DVLA, they get asked to provide opinions for all sorts of different things. And we're looking to see if there's any way we can take some of that workload off them to make sure that their clinical time is being used to maximum effect, and that we're only asking GPs to do things that only they need to do, which hopefully then improves the process for them. On the point about the orthopaedic waiting list, there is a delicate, just to be confirmed, there is no policy that says we should treat younger people ahead of older people. Patients are treated in terms of their clinical needs. So there may be occasions where people have not waited as long as someone else they know, and they're getting treated quicker. That will be based on the basis of clinical need, because we will always prioritise people for surgery based on their clinical need and the time they've waited. It isn't just because if you've waited the longest time, you're always going to get treated first. It is done on the basis if somebody is more clinically urgent, then they will get treated first. But age is not a fact that we take into account when we're making those considerations. And then the final point from Councillor Lewis about the maternity case and processes. As with all incidents, we learn we have a process for making sure that when a concern or complaint comes into us or an incident happens in one of our units, that the learning from that is put in place. And this case will be a case in point where we have learned from that incident, and we will be making changes to the way in which handover is managed in the unit to make sure that we learn from the cases like this, because it's really important that when these things do happen, not only do we acknowledge it's not a good experience for the person concerned, the most important thing is we put things right and try and avoid the situation happening again by making changes to our policy. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you, Mr. Mears. I think we probably won't really get another question in. So if any member out there has got something that they want to write in to the Health Board, Mr. Mears has already indicated he will respond, or the Health Board will respond. I'm now just going to go to the leader to close, and then we'll take a break as we get ready for full council. Leader, back to you, please.
No further comments from me, Chair. Just to thank the officers from the Health Board coming along. I would ask that we again ask them to come along maybe in the spring for a further update, in particular where we are with elective surgery, the pressures around that, and primary care. And no doubt there'll be probably a further update in terms of the vaccine rollout and whether it's extended to further age groups. So I would just offer that invitation to come back sometime maybe around February or March to give a further update to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And again, Mr. Mears, thank you very much. And can I thank members for their contribution and in the manner that they've contributed as well. So on this basis, we'll break and we'll resume for council in 10 minutes. Thanks very much.